Welcome to another edition of Garage Talks. I'm in the home of Eric Kenney, west of Boulder, about 7,000 feet in elevation. It's a little breezy outside. We were hoping to do this outside, but that's okay.
Yeah.
How you doing?
I'm doing good.
Yeah, it's good to see you.
Hanging in there, yeah.
It's been a while.
Yeah, it has. It has. There's no races for us to
Right?
converge at, so.
I didn't even run into you on the bike this year. Usually on some sort of a ride somewhere, right?
Yeah.
How's your year gone for you?
It's been good. It's been, I think like a lot of people, it's just been a whirlwind of learning, what to do and what not to do and figuring out everything.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, there's been a lot of new things, but and there's been a lot of things that I was gonna do at the onset of COVID. I'm like, oh, I should do this, and then I'm like, nah, like I'm not gonna get into that. This will be over in 3 months, and here we are. And
Did you start partying part of your house?
I did that.
Did you have a big project that you wanted to do here?
I mean, I did knock down some walls, but I was already doing that kind of before it started. So.
Okay. That's awesome. I love where you live. What's it? You're at 7,000 feet. How do you love living in this altitude in the woods? And I'm sure the fires were a bit scary this year.
Yeah, the fire danger is always a thing. This house is pretty well mitigated, but it's definitely, it's kind of always a threat. And just so but I wouldn't trade it. I would never live in town.
Do you like the mountain man sort of?
Yes.
Yeah, I can tell. I saw the axe outside. Do you like to chop down some wood once in a while, maybe?
Yeah. I really like just living in the woods, and it's just dark here and quiet, and it's really nice.
Where'd you grow up?
On the East Coast in New England.
In New England.
So yeah.
Was it a similar setting in the woods, or were you in a city?
No, I lived in kind of north western Connecticut. That's where I grew up. So it was kind of rural, and I went to school up in New Hampshire, and I did spend a lot of time outdoors. I grew up downhill skiing, and so I kind of always loved the outdoors and the woods, and I would do summer camps and hike, and I went to school in New Hampshire, and I spent a lot of time in northern, up in the woods. And
you were did you ski race? Were you?
No,
you just skied.
I didn't. No,
Yeah.
I started skiing very, very young, and I remember the ski racing thing being a thing. Like I can barely remember it, and I just didn't want to do it.
Yeah.
I just didn't. At that time, like I wasn't into competition, which will sound really weird for anyone that knows me.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, I was just really into the outdoors and things like skiing, and I started rock climbing and ice climbing at a pretty young age, and I just liked that, kind of being in nature and doing all those kinds of cool things.
Well, before we started, you told me you were an only child.
I am.
So did you have a lot of friends that got you into the outdoors, or was your parents into the outdoors, or?
My parents were skiers. They were both on the National Ski Patrol, and so I grew up in that whole thing.
Gotcha.
And then, I really got into, just with some other friends of mine, just into the outdoors and climbing and skiing all the time, and so it was always, I played soccer in high school, and I'd always thought about doing some other sports, and kind of people were like, you should go out for track, and you should do this, and every time that time of the season came around, I was like, I just want to go climbing, and I want to go skiing, and so I was always just kind of into the outdoors and doing all those other things that school didn't really offer. So.
But when we were talking about doing this interview, you mentioned a pretty solid career as a rower. How did that happen?
Yeah. I went to college, and I remember I kind of wanted to change who I was.
Okay.
I went to college very open book. I was like, I need to be someone better. And so I went to school, and I definitely got into the party scene to keep that PG. I got into the party scene pretty seriously right away.
Okay.
And so the first semester was all into that. And a friend of mine I think we were at lunch, he's like, you should come down with the crew team. And I'm like, what? What is that? And he's like, we just work out in the gym, and it's fun. It's a good group of guys. And so I went down there with him, and I worked out with the crew team, and I thought this would be a great way for me to get away from all the other stuff I'm doing.
Right.
Because that's not sustainable. And so I started working out with the crew team, and it was really intense, and I really liked it. And then we started rowing on the water, and I was really into it, and I was really into this whole concept of racing.
Yeah.
And there's no referees, there was no, slow death that you see field sports kind of happen, and like in soccer, you're down 5-1 or something. It's like, the racing thing is very like, there's almost no rules. It's you start here and you finish there, and whoever gets there first wins.
Right.
Plain and simple.
No technique other than the rowing, obviously.
Yeah, and with rowing, it was very, and like a lot of sports, there's just hours upon hours and months and years of training and practicing so you can do a 6-minute race.
Right.
And so that was frustrating at times, but it was also really, made it really intense and really that much more satisfying when, that race went well.
Talk about the team aspect of a rowing team.
It's kind of undescribable. It's if you're on a basketball team or a football team or soccer team, and say you and I are both on the team, and you don't come to practice one day because you're sick, right?
Right.
You can still do practice. You can still run plays, and you can do all the stuff you need to do.
Right. Sure.
On a rowing team, if someone doesn't come to practice, you can't go out in the water.
Just because the balance of the boat or the...
Yeah, you can't do it unless everyone's there.
Really? I never knew that.
You can't unless you have someone else you can put in there, but you can't row a boat with 4 people rowing on one side and 3 people rowing on the other. I mean, you can, but it's...
Oh, I see what you're saying.
And so the camaraderie and the commitment is very intense.
Yeah.
Immediately. There's no like, I don't think I can make it to practice today. I mean, the entire team will come to your dorm room.
Huh. I never knew that. I guess it makes sense thinking about it.
Yeah. And so it's really intense. And the whole aspect of rowing, most people I'm sure have probably seen it. It's very, it's a very synchronous thing.
Right.
Everyone has to do the exact same thing at the exact same time, or the boat doesn't go very fast at best. At worst, it can flip over, and
yeah, because they're tippy, right? I mean, like,
yeah, they're very. I mean, you have 8 guys in a boat that's like this wide at the widest part, and so there's a real, it doesn't matter how good of a rower you are if you can't do the same thing with everyone else, then it doesn't work.
Yeah.
And I've been in boats with I was in boats with a bunch of amazing rowers, and it didn't go very well because people couldn't adjust to each other, and then there are other boats where we had the camp I was at in '99, we had a boat full of with the exception of maybe one guy, we had the boat full of just like pretty good guys, but I mean we won everything that year.
Yeah, so how did you, because you advanced to a level that you were hoping to maybe make the Olympic rowing team, correct?
Yeah.
How does someone break out of the team component and become known as a really good rower and then move on to a different level? How is that possible?
Well, there's a couple different ways that you can do it. The national team would have open team trials.
Okay.
And so basically you would go to Princeton, where the training center was, still is, I think, for the men anyway, and then they have a race, and whoever wins that race goes to the World Championship.
The team goes to the race, not
that boat. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So you can go as a boat, which I did a couple of times, and other people from Riverside Boat Club where I rode in Boston have gone and won, actually.
Okay.
That happened when I was there as well, but it's happened more recently. The other way that you can break into that is you go to what they have these things called ID camps.
Okay.
And you go there with a bunch of people. They invite anybody. You can go and just show up, and you do an erg test on the rowing machine.
Okay.
And then they basically select the people that have, they take the 8 fastest times, and you go in the first boat.
With these people you've never rowed with.
Yeah. Well, it depends. I mean, if I did that a couple times, and I was there with some people that I knew from the boat club, and so they were there as well. And so you get thrown into a boat with 4 national team guys and 4 other dudes, and you go out and row, and they watch you, and the coaches watch you, and then you might get invited to go down there and train.
Gotcha.
With the national team, and then so a lot of that selection's done by rowing machine, ergometer test times, and things like that, and then they take a look at you row, and then they might invite you to row down there, and then through that process you can, now you're on that team, so to speak, and then you can make a boat or not make a boat depending on what happens.
So I did read The Boys in the Boat, and it is kind of an interesting snapshot how I forgot about how the teams do qualify, because in that particular book the team from Washington went to the Olympics as the team because they beat the whoever
and it's a lot different than like triathlon or running or cycling where you have your own bike or whatever and you can train out of your house and go whenever you want. With rowing you need these insanely expensive boats. And you need a boathouse to put it in and a dock to put it onto the water somewhere. And all this infrastructure. And then other people if you're into, the team boats and the sweep boats. And so people gravitate to those clubs. And so like after I graduated from college, I went to Wisconsin to a development camp for the summer up there. And then after that I moved to Boston and started rowing at Riverside Boat Club. Which has and still has a very big lightweight presence for development men and women, and I rowed there and I lived in Boston. And,
So how did you transition into triathlon from that athletic background?
Well, so I rowed for 3 or 4 years after college, and I had already started cycling. I actually transitioned to cycling first.
Okay.
And so I transitioned. I moved into cycling. I started cycling while I was rowing a little bit, as a way to cross train. And this will sound crazy, but I got into cycling so that I could ride my bike in the winter.
Oh, really?
Because
you couldn't row.
Training on a rowing machine is really gruesome, and it's really hard to do it for long periods of time.
Right.
And so I got a bike and started riding in the winter, and I thought, man, I can do like a 2-hour workout. And it's like, it's not that hard. Like it's, it's all legs and it's good for me and it's, it doesn't beat you up and I'm not sitting in a hard seat and all that kind of stuff. And so, and then we had done a couple of races, and then in 2001, I got back from team trials, and I stopped rowing, and 2 weeks later I did a bike race with a friend of mine, and I never looked back. It was so fun, and I loved the whole kind of dynamic of it's always a different course, and it's a different length, and there's different people, and the racing tactics the race will play out in a different way every single time, and I really liked that whole aspect of kind of surviving the course and the peloton, as well as trying to do something competitive. There's like 2 very different things going on.
So what was your favorite kind of bike race?
I really enjoyed
crits, road races?
Really enjoyed all of them. I was better at certain ones than others, but I really enjoyed all different kinds of racing. It was more a matter of how the race went.
Were you on a team?
Yeah, I was always on some kind of a team, some kind of club or.
So explain, share maybe a thought about how a bike team is similar or different than a rowing team.
Well, on a cycling team, there's definitely, you know, you don't kind of cross the line winning together.
Right.
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 And so the teamwork and the sacrifice that the other teammates can make for the person to win, the race leader, team leader, whoever, is often not seen or understood by a lot of people. But the sacrifice can be more.
Absolutely.
It can be, and in that aspect, it's pretty intense. I think it's harder to make a really strong, cohesive team because there's so much individual training and a lot of individual training time. It can be tough to do that and then go to a race. And whereas rowing, practice, it was twice a day, early in the morning, and everyone's kind of there together,
right,
dealing with the weather or the whatever.
And there's tactics on a cycling team, whereas on a rowing team,
right,
just one goal is to get from this into that.
Yeah. And so it can be really different, I think. But one of the similar kind of strange thing with cycling is rowing is all the frustrating stuff and how difficult it is to actually make a team plan or team tactics go right is what makes it so great when it does go well.
Right.
Those are the times that you just think, man, like this is so amazing, and you go through 20 other times that are horrible so that you can have that one perfect race again.
Right. We're all looking for that perfect race.
Yeah.
Well, so you obviously were a very good rower, and obviously probably a really good cyclist. Did you have aspirations of making cycling a career?
No. No. And coming from rowing to cycling, I was I was brand new to cycling, and I was Cat 5, and I was doing some training races and training with this club in Boston, and everyone was like, "Oh my God, you should turn pro," and I was like, "No." I was like, I've had that opportunity, kind of, not necessarily be a professional, but to be on the national team in rowing, and I rushed it in rowing, and I didn't enjoy the process enough. It was just about getting to that end goal, and I saw other people do this too, and it kind of blew it, and so I didn't really want to do that. I was really enjoying myself with cycling, and so I never really did want to be a pro cyclist, but I enjoyed all my time cycling for sure.
So then, when did you do your first triathlon? And why did you do your first triathlon?
Well, I've done a bunch of triathlons of, I think probably my first 3-sport event was a triathlon up in New Hampshire at a summer camp, like a family summer camp, and it was a swim canoe run.
There you go.
So but I actually did. I did some duathlons when I was a cyclist.
Okay.
Like I would in the fall, I had a bunch of friends who were triathletes, and that I would train with sometimes, and so I did a handful of relays, and then I can't remember the year, but there was one year I convinced a handful of my friends to go to Montauk, Long Island. Right? That's the end of Long Island, the tip of Long Island. There was a half Ironman out there.
Okay.
And I was like, we should go do this race. And so I had 4 weeks to prepare for it after the cycling season was over.
Oh, man.
And my other friends had some more time where they were triathletes. A bunch of us went out and did this race in Montauk. It was cool. And I couldn't walk for days afterwards. For days, so these big cycling legs that were
How did you do?
Good for running. I did okay.
Yeah?
Yeah, it was a smaller race, and I never had any real formal swim training, but I was really comfortable in the water.
Yeah.
I kind of grew up swimming in lakes and stuff like that.
Right.
And so I seemed to do okay swimming also. The pack didn't bother me.
Oh, okay.
And this wasn't like a Lake Placid start that's horrendous, but this was a big, so I did okay. and I had a good bike, and then I just kind of, really suffered on the run.
So when did you, did you turn pro triathlete? Were you a pro triathlete?
No.
You've always been, well, not always, I guess, but you're an elite level triathlete.
I mean,
whatever that exactly means.
whatever that means. I don't
But
know.
I mean, I've seen you at races, and you've always been near the top or at the top.
Yeah.
And how did you progress? What was your big stepping stone or step forward in becoming a really good triathlete? Was there a moment, a coach, was there something that really drove that?
Well, I was a road cyclist primarily for like 9 years.
Okay.
And even when I was a rower, I had heard of, Mark Allen and Kona, and I thought one day I'll do that. Like I'll stop, doing cycling, and I'll do triathlon, and I'll do that race in Hawaii. And then, as years went by, I realized you had to qualify for it, and as I started coaching, I realized that it was quite difficult to do that, and I coached some.
Let me stop you real quick. When did you start coaching in?
99.
99. What's when you first started coaching?
That's when I first started coaching.
Coaching triathletes?
Rowers.
Rowers.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was the year that I was at in Boston rowing at Riverside. I actually hurt my back that winter before going into 99. I thought, I can't row, so I might as well run. And so a friend of mine and I ran the Boston Marathon. And this is back when they allowed bandits to do it. Okay. Which is really frowned upon now for rightfully so, I think. But they had like a special corral for all of us.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was like they had a whole thing where it was just like, and they gave you numbers, or you bought them for $1 that just had the year on them.
Really? And
they were a different color. So it was kind of obvious, but like, yeah, there was just, and you were the last.
Oh, no kidding.
The last corral to go.
Huh.
Yeah.
I never heard that before.
Yeah, so a friend of mine and I ran the Boston Marathon, which was a horrible idea. I was just so.
Does that mean if I look back at the records, you wouldn't be there because you were a bandit?
No, yeah.
There's no names.
There's no. I don't know. I don't think there's any official result for us.
Okay. That's interesting.
I don't think there is, because I don't remember having a timing chip or anything like
interesting.
that, or whatever. Yeah. So but maybe we should look at some point. I don't know, maybe it is there. That was a while ago. Yeah. But 99, I started rowing. Coaching rowers. I got a job at Buckingham Brown and Nichols, which is a prep school. They have a boathouse in the Charles.
Okay.
I interviewed there. I got a job as the assistant men's varsity coach.
Okay.
And that was just like the best job ever.
Huh.
And
so that's where you really started to love coaching.
That was it for me.
Yeah.
I started coaching with them, and I thought, this is cool. It's afternoons, and I got to do a couple weekends, but I was working at Starbucks at the time, and I thought doing 40 hours there is just going to kill me, and so this was awesome, and I remember being out in the water one day in the launch and just being like, I'm getting paid for this.
Yeah. I
really like this. And then there was one day in particular where I thought, wow, I'm good at this. And I didn't think those three things actually really happened ever in a job. Right. And they don't for a lot of people. Right. And I just thought, holy cow, like I have to keep doing this. So
what is it like to coach somebody in rowing? Is it similar to triathlon? You do certain testing, you have watts, except it's for...
Yeah, so the rowing machine, gives you a lot of information. And there's a 500 meter split, which is kind of like equivalent to like a running pace per mile, if you will. Okay. You just do it in 500 meters. And then there's watts on it as well.
So is there an FTP like we have in cycling? We have our...
Yeah, there is. We did it wrong back when I was a rower. Okay. We were all told the wrong thing of what your, threshold is, or your maximal lactate steady state. And we did a couple other things wrong too. But yeah, you can totally there's some testing, different durations that they use for tests, 2,000 meters and 6,000 meters. Okay. And so there's a lot of that physical part on the rowing machine inside, and then on the water there's a lot of, coaching people to move together blade work and
technical things.
hold the thing like this. Yeah, not like that. A lot of technical things.
So then, fast forward a little bit. You've been doing triathlons. You've had whatever success. You love coaching.
Yeah.
When did you start doing coaching for triathlon?
Really early. I was coaching for BB&N for a little while, and then I stopped. I was working at a health club for a while, and I had a corporate job. This is very early 2000s. Like Training Peaks is like just came out. Like you would add a workout and the whole page had to refresh.
Oh, right.
And I started doing some coaching because people were asking me about it, and I'd always loved the whole physiology thing too. Like from early on, I was always like figuring out what was. When I was rowing, people would often like ask me of like what should we do for a workout and stuff. I was so into the physiology and why we would do 10-minute intervals instead of 6-minute intervals and the whole thing. And so I started coaching. So I started coaching some cyclists after I stopped coaching and rowing, and I was a cyclist. And I started coaching some cyclists, and I had some friends that were in triathlon, and so I started talking with people doing triathlons pretty early, so early 2000s.
Okay.
But that grew into mostly road cycling. Even from the beginning, I was very kind of even 50-50 road cyclists, triathletes, and it would fluctuate a lot depending on, what was going on, but
And this was out on the East Coast?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And then when did you come to Boulder and start your coaching business here?
So coaching was going pretty well, and then I moved out here in 2006.
Okay.
And that's when I remember I moved out here, and then that summer I was like, and a friend of mine a very good friend of mine I'm still friends with. I remember him saying like, you should do this for a living, and I'm like, what? I'm like, you can't do that. Like that doesn't. You can't like, coach individuals and do individual consulting as a job. Like that doesn't work. And that first summer out here, I was like, man, like I can almost pay my bills right now. And I was like, I have to like do this. And so that's when I called an old friend of mine who's a design guy. He actually like makes commercials now for a firm in New York City. And that's when he made my logo, which is the logo I still have. And I came up with the name, and I got the website, and I was like, I need to like, make this like legit and
right.
And have a better just kind of business presence.
In a pretty competitive environment in Boulder, right?
Yeah.
Or was it not so much then?
It wasn't like that so much back then.
Okay.
To be honest with you. And then, so that's when that happened, and that started growing, and, and just getting more and more consistent. And I started, working with different teams and clubs, locally, cycling teams, triathlon clubs. And then 2009 was kind of, at that year, I remember it was like midway through the summer, and I was like, I'm going to do an Ironman next summer. I was like, I'm going to stop.
You hadn't done one until then?
No, not a full Ironman.
Oh.
I coached a ton.
Okay.
And
But
so
you hadn't done your own?
I had not done an Ironman, no. I'd done a handful of halves and other, shorter stuff, multi-sport stuff, but I've never focused on it, and I never did a full Ironman.
Okay.
And so, yeah, people are often surprised by that.
Yeah, I am a little bit too, actually.
I coached a bunch of people to do Ironmans. I actually coached, it was like this was so long ago. It was like a husband and wife, I think. And I think she went to Kona, or he did. One of them qualified. I forget which one. And so, and I had friends that were in triathlon, and so I had a good bead on, kind of preparing people in general, but yeah, 2010 was when I.
So which one did you do?
Canada, Penticton.
Yeah. Okay.
It was still Penticton then, and then
Yeah,
it's back there, but yeah.
I did it in 2012.
Right.
Last year it was there.
Yeah.
What? And now it's back, of course.
Yeah.
So 2010 was your first Ironman.
Yeah.
How'd it go?
It went really well, actually, and it's really bizarre because here I'm like this Cat 1 cyclist, but yet I run for 30 minutes and I'm sore for 2 days. And so, like, if you looked at my training from then, it was insane because it was just like 5-hour bike rides and intervals and all this stuff, and then it'd be like 30-minute run, really sore, no more running for 2 days. Like,
Okay.
And so that progression was really slow, and I was very careful with it because I didn't want to get injured, and I've never really been a particularly good runner. Like, when we would do a run when I was a rower, there was always like 1 or 2 guys that were worse than me, and then that was it. Like,
okay.
Everyone else was
But I've seen you run. You're good. I mean,
well,
you must have obviously worked on it.
yeah,
You're
there's
pretty-
probably some people laughing if they're watching this right now. I think that, but I'm really good at faking it for short course stuff.
Because, well, like the Boulder Pete, you're on the podium, you're in, you're out for your age group or elites or whatever, and bike for show, run for dough, as they say, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Does that mean, do you believe that, or do you think that's not necessarily the case?
The bike for show, run for dough thing. I think it's a good saying. I think, and I remember I wrote an article before I was even doing triathlons called All Four Sports, and I coach this way, and I believe this, and you see this in all kinds of results, which is like, this is not it's not a running race, and it's not a bike race, and definitely not a swim race. But if you want to do really well, you got to be able to do all three,
right?
And you better be able to put together a good race. And it's very easy for everyone to look at the results because it's always, here's a swim, bike, run, and here's the rank, and it's so easy for everyone to look at what they did or what anyone else did and be like, that person doesn't run fast enough, or this person's a shitty swimmer, or whatever.
Right.
And it just doesn't matter. I started writing an article one time that I never finished, and it was comparing Mirinda Carfrey and Danielle Rife.
That'd be interesting. I'd love to hear that.
And the fact is, I think, is that it's easy for us to sit here and be like, oh, Rainey's not a good enough cyclist, but she's such a good runner. And then you have someone else. I remember the Chris Lieto days where it was like he would just dominate the bike, but he'd get caught in the run. And it's so easy for people to just be like, well, they're not good enough at this or good enough at that. And it's like the actuality is of it that like Rennie's going just as hard on the bike and is prepared just as hard as everybody else. She's not quite as fast.
Right.
And the same thing with the run. Like their intensities and their preparations are, the focus is the same, but, like people are going to have their strengths and their weaknesses.
Right.
And I remember my first year doing triathlon, people were just like, dude, you have to run more. And I'm like, I'm not a good runner. Like, I just started running,
Yeah, yeah.
And or people would be like, it's easy to look at the guy that rides super fast and be like, you need to just back off on the bike, which often is the case with a lot of people. But I'm just like, I'm a cat.
You need to take advantage of what you're good at, right?
Like, and I'm not going that hard. Like, this is, I'm just better.
Right.
And I'm not better when it comes to running. And
Right.
so,
Well, I want to get back to your style of coaching and some other things about coaching. But while we're sort of on this topic, you and I were talking earlier about the Daytona Race.
yeah.
And to me, that was a really, really interesting race. I'd like to get your take on it because not only was the distance sort of weird, right? It's 100K.
Yeah.
So we had discussions with athletes before the race on our podcast. Some people thought it really favored the long course guys. Some people thought it was the short course guys. Some people were sort of mixed. Like Matt Hansen, who ended up getting second on our show, was like, I think it pretty much favors the short course guys.
Yeah.
But maybe not, whatever. But you had athletes of all strengths. And that's where you could really start to compare runs and swims and bikes. Yeah. What was your overall take of that event from that perspective?
Wow, so many things. I mean, I think it was definitely a really cool event. The fact how hyped up it was and the coverage of it, the video coverage was great. I thought all that was fantastic. That we were talking about earlier and highlighting all these different athletes, and I thought that was really cool. In terms of the competitive side and the different specialists, I think it's really tough to compare them in 2020.
Yeah.
Especially with the Olympics coming up.
True.
A lot of the short course guys, especially those elite level people, haven't been preparing for this, and the money got them into it, but I think in the back of their head they really didn't care.
Oh, I thought about that.
And when you look at the people who didn't go,
right,
and I mean, I'm not gonna claim to know what any of those people were thinking, right? Danielle Rife, Flora, right? I don't know.
Right.
But when you look at those top end people, whether they're Kona champions, Olympians, etc., they're like, the money's great, but I don't need this. I want to go to the Olympics and win.
Right.
I don't, you know what I mean?
Right.
And so I think, and the other thing too is this whole year with COVID, we saw a lot of people there really blow up.
Yeah.
Because no one's been racing.
Right.
Training has been, I'm sure very different for everyone.
Yep.
Some people aren't prepared for that head-to-head race. A lot of people mentally, I think, got caught up into things, right? I think, our good buddy Sam Long kind of looks like he got pretty amped up and carried away, and
he backed it up.
He had a great race. I did not think he was going to get that far up there, and it was impressive.
Yeah.
But we saw a lot of people blow up. I was really hoping the short course guys were going to dominate everyone.
And they didn't.
And I thought I was hoping that they were going to. But then I found out that the draft distance was 20 meters.
Right.
Instead of a normal Ironman 10.
Right.
Let alone the normal
ITU,
standard not even ITU, but a USAT 3 bike lengths.
Oh, okay. Yep.
Right. And I thought, man, that's really far. And then I thought, this distance is gonna give them trouble. And I was talking about this with someone, and I said, you know what? The distance on the bike is gonna give this non-draft distance, and the full distance on that bike is gonna give the ITU people problems.
Yeah.
And I pulled it up in the morning. We had a big text thread going with everybody a bunch of my athletes and the guys on the team and stuff. And I saw the women get out, and I saw them get out on that track and start riding.
Yeah.
And I thought, the short course people are going to get killed. Because, there wasn't you never had to get out of your aero bars.
Right.
And this was never get out of your aero bars, no cornering, no climbing, descending, very lacking skills set.
Yep.
And how many watts can you put out for that long? And still run.
Grueling.
Yeah.
Just
and still run, yeah. And the faces on a lot of these guys when they got off the bike and started running was like, people looked horrible. And I think a lot of that was from just the I'm never moving from this position.
Right.
And I thought, man, this is just going to be the short course people are just going to get crushed. And especially the ITU guys and girls, because they're riding their road bike all the time.
Right.
And now, 2 weeks before, they're like, I'll ride my time trial bike so I can try to win some cash. And,
But then you have a Gustav, who's basically a short course ITU kind of guy.
Yeah.
But he's also he's a good Ironman, half Ironman guy, who wins pretty handedly, actually.
Yeah.
But then you get Matt Hansen, who's a great runner, who just blows through a pack. It was super exciting. Yeah. The women didn't have quite the drama, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Paula Finley just sort of led from beginning to end and just took it.
Yeah.
Not out of the swim, but
it would have been a lot closer if it wasn't for that penalty. But she still would have won, it seems like.
Yeah.
And she looked fantastic.
She did.
And Paula Finley is my favorite triathlete.
Why?
She's so nice. When I first met her at Rally Sport, I had no idea she was like an Olympian even at the time, and she was just super nice and chatted with me, and she was in this Nike commercial, and I was like, hey, I see you on TV, you're in a Nike commercial. I was like, that's weird.
That's funny.
And she's so nice, and I think she's really, I think she's a great athlete, and I've learned more about her history as well, and it's, I think it's so great to see her do well. So.
Well, let's spend a little bit of time, so we didn't get too long here, but let's talk about the community. You mentioned Rally Sport. You've been a big part of the community for a long time.
Yeah.
You've got your EK team.
Yeah.
You coach people. They're two different entities.
Yeah.
And you were coaching the Vixen team, which
Yeah.
isn't around anymore. But what about the community here inspires you the most?
I mean, there's the triathlon community in general has always been very welcoming and friendly, and it's just a fun environment, you know. And I remember when I first got here, I emailed Barry Siff when he was running the triathlon series,
right?
And I was like, hey Barry, you know, like I'm a coach, and you know, I wanna like sponsor your race. And I remember him being like, yeah, he's like, that's a lot of money. He's like, honestly, you'd be better off spending it somewhere else. And so I remember going down to the Boulder Peak, and I'd be like, I'm gonna check out this small local race, and there's over 2,000 people.
I say it wasn't small, was it?
And I was like, oh my God. And so it's incredible. The community here is incredible because it's the triathlon community is really large.
Right.
People come here and they're like, you know, oh my God, we're in the car fray. Right. And I'm like, yeah, like.
And there's your husband Tim.
I see her here all the time. Like I talk to her all, and so there's so many people like that here, and there's so many other just people doing triathlon, and so it's a large community, but it's really tight knit at the same time. Like everyone kind of knows each other.
Do you learn a lot from that community?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you go to these races and there's so many different people doing different races and, training for an Ironman, but doing Boulder Peak or, focusing on the Boulder Peak. And the collegiate guys here, which fortunately I have a couple of them on the Boulder racing team now. And it's like, as a coach, it's great because there's so many people doing so many different things, and I really like just walking around, learning from people, like talking to people about their races, and I have a lot of people that will come to me after a race to unfortunately when it goes wrong, and they're like, how do I do this better? Which is always fun for me because I like learning and figuring out why someone did or didn't do better, and there's a lot of people like that. You go to any one of these races, and it's, it's fantastic.
So tell me if I came to you and said, I want you to coach me.
Yeah.
Tell me what I would experience. What's the Eric Kenney style of coaching?
Well, I get asked that a lot. Like, what's your philosophy, or what's, are you a distance guy? Are you a volume guy or an intensity guy? And my answer is always that's the wrong question. You really have to figure out what is going on with that person and
but what about the experience?
They need. Yeah, well, the experience is diving into that, and so a lot of it is I've called myself before a resource, like a training resource management specialist.
Right.
What do you have available to you? What kind of time do you have available? What's your history and background? Hopefully we can do some kind of testing and figure out the physiology a little bit and figure out the psychology, the mental components a little bit. And I always say to people, we'll just start working the process. Just start doing some training and getting feedback on it and looking at data, but also talking to them about what does it feel like,
right?
And so, this happens all the time. I just had an athlete text me yesterday. He's like, how does that run look today? And I looked at it and I'm like, well, how did it feel?
Right.
The data's great, but you didn't say was it really hard? Was it easy?
Do you think people should race with a watch and know everything, or do you think they should run by feel?
I think they should race with it. I think that people should use all the tools available to them, but you have to use them in the right way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so if you're looking at your watch in a race, chasing a split or chasing a time, and not listening to the other things like your perceived exertion and what's going on, the whole thing, and how you feel. Yeah, we've seen this at Boulder Ironman a bunch of times with people just getting off the bike and pegging a pace, and it's 100 degrees outside.
Right.
and at altitude, and they just crumble.
Guilty.
Yeah, right? They just crumble, and you have other athletes that are paying attention to what's going on and their environment and their surroundings and how they feel and what they need to do on this particular day at this particular moment, and they do much, much better. And so there's a lot of, I think there's a lot of, I hope, there's a lot of that learning for the athlete, and the psychological preparation and mental preparation inside all of the physical training that we do.
I mean, I look at coaching as there's an accountability factor, there's
Yeah.
an expertise factor of knowledge, but there's an inspirational, like
Yeah.
helping your clients feel inspired,
Yeah.
and
yeah.
sort of a psychologist. It's sort of the old three-legged stool sort of thing, right?
Yeah. The stool analogy is a good one. Yeah, I mean, I do a bunch of group workouts, and so I, coaching for me and starting coaching individually was really exciting for me because I didn't have that as a rower. And a lot of, when you're in the boat and you're doing stuff as a team, you can't do the special intervals for Bill, right? You got to do whatever, you got to do the whole same thing.
Right.
But even in the winter time, we didn't have the analysis and the consultation or that individualized coaching that some of them do now. I consult with rowers now on winter training and off-season training a lot. And it pays off. And so when I got into coaching an individual athlete, I was obsessed with it because I was like, this is amazing. Like we can get such good results doing personalized stuff. And so I like doing that, but I also really enjoy working with teams and working with groups of people and having that coaching leadership team like you're talking about. And I really admire all these other coaches. There's a really good documentary on Netflix right now called The Coaches Playbook.
Okay.
And there's a few different episodes with different coaches, and when you talk with these coaches like basketball coaches or football coaches that are selecting the team, coming up with plays, running practices, like instilling this culture in the team, and then making plays in the games, and I'm like, that is real coaching.
Right.
Like giving people workouts in a weekly schedule is not coaching.
Right. That's management.
That's just training plan management. And so I've kind of gravitating towards, and the local people that I have, I sort of run like a team.
Yeah.
And I try to come up with a good balance of individualized training. You need to do this, they need to do that. And then also doing the group workouts where everyone can get together and push each other, inspire each other.
Right.
I get to see what's going on with people. I get to see them move, and if they're tired, or sometimes you can tell when something's off with an athlete mentally. Technique stuff obviously is big. And so I try to do those good things in terms of the group as well.
Is there a coach that really inspires you at some point in your life?
Yeah, I've had some really great ones. My coach, my senior year of college was really good. She was really good.
Yeah.
We had a lot of different coaches. We had a really small program. I mean, the college I went to had 1,200 students total.
Oh, okay.
And so it was a super small school. And she came from a rowing program in Wisconsin, huge D1 school.
Okay.
And a big rowing program there. And she came from there, and I learned a lot from her in a lot of different ways. And then in '99, when I rowed for Riverside at the development camp, we had two really good coaches, fantastic coaches that I learned more about kind of after that year, or the end of that year. The assistant coach was volunteering, which none of us really knew until right before the last race. Our head coach told us.
Yeah.
And they were great, and they did so many really good things. And that assistant coach went on to be a really legendary coach at Northeastern University.
Oh.
Right after that.
So did they inspire you? Do you think you draw upon some of that?
Yeah, I mean, I still use quotes from them.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And so.
Huh. How about a proud moment? Because I'll never forget a couple years ago at Ironman Boulder when Liz qualified, and I got that picture of you just like you just like you were like whoa.
Yeah.
Was that, I don't know if that was your most proud moment, but talk about a proud or just being proud as a coach compared to an athlete. How do you what makes you feel better?
I mean, definitely as a coach, definitely as a coach, I think I really like the teaching aspect of it, to where, you can help someone, even if it's in really small ways, and then they go and succeed on their own.
Yeah.
Right. And so, I brought up like the football analogy where, you can have a coach make a great play, call a great play, and then they do it. And so I like even being my role is I'm much farther removed from that. Mm-hmm. And so, especially in rowing, you spend all this time on the water with them and yelling at them and, talking with the boat and individuals and figuring things out. And then on race day, you as a coach, you stand on shore.
Right.
And they have to go do everything.
Right.
And so it's cool to see that progression where, I might be working with an athlete on the track where I get to talk to them and yell to them and tell them to fix this and make sure you keep focusing on that. But on race day, it's like...
Yeah, what's it like? You're on your phone. Let's take Liz. And you're tracking and she's in this position and that position and you want to just go... It's got to be tough.
Yeah.
Over an Ironman, especially a 10-hour day or 11-hour day.
Oh, God. I remember, the first year, in 2014 Ironman Boulder, I had 9 local athletes racing. And that was pretty early after I started coaching swimming, which was really stressful because I had a very different idea of how I wanted to prepare for swimming than most people. And I was really confident it was going to work until I had 9 people in the pool all looking at me like, okay, let's do this. And I was just like, holy cow, I don't know if this is going to work. And so I think it's scary, especially when you have people that are really at a higher level and really hoping to do something big.
Right.
Because the worst is just thinking that I messed up their day. Right. That's the worst feeling. But it's nerve-wracking. That first year in 2014, I was a mess. I was running all over the place, and I was trying to catch everyone on course, and you end up just missing everyone. And I remember just running around and riding my bike around and keeping track of everyone. And I remember going past Mike Ritchie in the D3 tent. And he had his tent a really good spot to see people in a lonely area.
Yep.
Yeah. And he's just sitting there. And I thought I should do that.
Yeah.
What I'm doing is just stupid. And that was when I remember realizing this in the race. I was super stressed out and I'm running around all over the place. I hadn't been eating or drinking enough. And I was like, people can tell I'm stressed.
Yeah.
And that's not good for the athlete.
True. Yeah.
And I remember realizing it.
That's a good point.
And I had to make this change. And so now I try to pull the athlete back to the center of whatever they are. Yeah. So you have athletes that are super amped and they're just I'm going to dominate everything. I'm just hold on, you're not that good. Yeah. And then I have to turn around and there's another athlete who's crying because they don't think they can do it. And I have to be you're amazing. You're totally going to do this. It's fine.
Right.
And so, that can be, I think the presence on race day is a lot more about poise for the athlete as opposed to me. I'm not going to tell them anything. There's no play I can, I'm going to call to have them do better.
Right.
And a lot of times it's just kind of poise and bringing people back to the big picture of what we're really doing. And so I think, you brought up Liz. There was one year at Boulder when I'm not sure if it was the year she qualified or the year before. And the year before was the first time that she had been on the podium.
Okay.
So either way, it was a great performance, but she was on the run course and it was pretty late in the run. I think she had 5 or 6 miles left. And she was running by, she didn't look great. And she was running towards me and I said, "How you doing?" And she didn't look up at me. She said, "I just threw up."
Oh.
And I said, "That's okay, I don't care." And it sounded really bad. There were some other people nearby and they were just like, "What the hell?" You know? But she understood what I meant, which was like,
shake it off.
I don't care.
Yeah.
Like, you know, you're the last 6 miles of an Ironman and you're in, you know, top 5.
Right.
Like no one's, you shouldn't be ashamed.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Like, it doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter.
Right.
Like, your stomach's probably upset. Like, I get it, but like, this is not the time for self-pity.
Yeah.
Like, you're doing amazing. I was like, I don't care.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so, I was like, you know, like, and she got what I was saying. She kind of just, you know, she kind of got on with it.
So I'm gonna, maybe we should get time to wrap up a little bit so I could talk all day. I'm really having fun. But early in this interview, you mentioned that you went to college, hit the party scene pretty hard, weren't really thrilled with who you were. You jumped into the crew thing and that sort of maybe righted your ship a little bit.
Yeah.
No pun intended, maybe a little bit of pun
Yeah,
intended.
yeah.
And here you are, 20 some years later, coaching people,
Yeah.
have a company. Talk about the growth of Eric Kenney.
Huh.
And maybe in 10 years, what do you think is going to happen too?
I mean, yeah,
What do you learn most as a person?
I mean, when, I think I've definitely experienced in my past the whole, like, Dunning-Kruger effect thing, which is, you know, the less you know, kind of the more, like, as soon as you learn a little bit about something, you think you know everything.
Yeah.
And then the more and more you learn about an actual topic, you realize the less you know. That's the Dunning-Kruger effect, right?
I guess, I don't know, I've never heard that.
I think that's what it's called. But, yeah, and so it's always been, I've always been, when I was a rower, you know, I was very confident and you know, I had that real kind of race day, game day attitude of no one can beat me, and I was super cocky in those times, and I think back then I didn't know how to turn that off.
Mm-hmm.
And so and I think back now to like the friends that I, you know, stuck with me through those rowing years and I'm still friends with now, and I'm just like, man, like I was awful. But so I feel like I've learned how to kind of turn that off.
Bring your zen into the world.
And I learned more and more how to kind of turn that on and off, and through the cycling years, and definitely through into those, especially, you know, doing triathlon in 2011 and 12, especially, you know, and going in Kona, really needing all of those tools of being super confident. I wrote something a long time ago about like the 2 different personalities that kind of you need to have and that I have in a race, and being able to kind of control them and learn all those things, and the other thing too that, I mean, I've always been learning. I've always wanted to learn more and more about coaching and physiology and all this stuff, and I remember really, really early just thinking to myself, kind of like going out of my way to find things that I was wrong about. And I think a lot of people just want to hear the stuff that makes them right, you know, and I was just watching this video of someone doing a run analysis, and it was awful because they were coming up with these weird reasons as to why their bad run form was actually really effective. And I'm like, you're just coming up with like, and you know, like, I'm like, I want to know like the correct way to do something so much that I don't care if I'm wrong. Like, I want to know. Yeah. Because I want to be, like, I actually want to be right, not sort of right. Right. And so I've always been trying to evolve that way and just just all kinds of different areas, and I don't know. I've learned a lot. I've learned that the human, the human being and the human physiology is pretty complex, and does weird things at weird times.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I don't know, in coaching and sports, I've learned that the psychology of an athlete and the mental aspects of an athlete are maybe more important than the physical ones.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
You see that time and time again.
So what's next year looking like for you?
Well, hopefully we'll be doing some racing.
Right.
I mean, the team is looking good, and we're started doing Zwift rides and inviting like everyone to do them, and
Yeah.
I'm just trying to keep people engaged, and we've got a bunch of people that are aiming for 70.3 worlds and all this stuff, and have a tentative training camp planned early in the year, but we'll see what happens.
Where would that be?
St. George, hopefully.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And maybe we'll just do it later in the summer, depending on COVID kind of things, and really looking forward just doing, some of the without limits races, and hopefully I'll be able to do some Xterras as well.
Yeah.
I plan to do that this year a little bit.
So where can people find you? EK Endurance.
Yeah, ekendurancecoaching.com
That's
is the website, and boulderracing.com is the team website, and whatever, Instagram.
I assume you would welcome some new people to coach?
Yeah.
Are you pretty full?
Yeah, I mean, definitely always interviewing people to work with, kind of depending on, making sure it fits. Like, sometimes people come to me and I'm just like, I'm not the guy for you.
Yeah.
I'll refer them to somebody else, for
Yeah.
sure. But
Yeah.
but yeah, I'm always looking for people that are kind of looking to make that next big leap.
Nice.
So
Well, thanks for spending some time with us. Get to
Yeah.
know you a little better. I learned a lot. I didn't know a lot of those things about you. So
yeah, thanks for coming up.
Yeah, it's
cool.
fun. All right, cool.